And welcome to this week's edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns, and I think how they say it in the business, we're on location this week. Is that right? We're down in Memphis, across the street from AutoZone Park. We'll be heading over there shortly for another ball game here in Memphis against Durham. And Mike, good. How are you today?
I'm good. Lots of interesting things happening in Memphis currently.
Yeah, I always enjoy coming down here. It's a fun ballpark. It's about a 4.5 hour drive from St. Louis, straight down I-55. It's a good time, and I think you're going to see a lot of good young players here. We're focusing a little bit on J.J. Weatherholt. You'll be reading a bigger story about him coming up here shortly on the website, stlsportspage.com, as well as, of course, obviously just checking out prospects. Did our annual prospect rankings here. They ran on Wednesday on the website. Always do that every year after the amateur draft, after the trade deadline. A lot of new faces in there, so I think people want to get familiar with some of the top prospects. You should check out that list. Of course, the Memphis Suburbs also actually going to be featured in the game on Thursday night on FanDuel Sports Network. Cardinals with the night off. They're going to pick up several of the Memphis games on the channel there. Alex Coyle, the play-by-play radio voice of the Memphis Suburbs, will have the call of the ball game. And Quinn Matthews is scheduled to be the starting pitcher. So I do think it's an important start for Quinn. We've talked a lot, Mike, about the openings that are going to be coming up in this starting rotation, perhaps in September, perhaps at the first of next year. Quinn has not pitched as well, obviously, in 2025 as he did in 2024 when he was the Baseball America's minor league pitcher of the year. Did have a very encouraging start in his last outing on the road at Norfolk, went 6 2/3 innings and struck out 9 and only walked 1. His control has been his problem. So I'm going to be really interested in watching him tonight pitch and see how he performs and see if he can keep that walk total down.
And without giving away your entire prospect list, my prediction would be your top 3 on your list are all with the big league club next year. Maybe not on opening day, but I would think all 3 of them will be on the big league club at some point next year, the top 3.
Yeah, 2 out of 3, I think you can pretty much book will be there, barring, of course, injuries. Obviously, no secret that J.J. Weatherholt's right there at the top of the list. Quinn Matthews is number 3. I think the only guy that might be a little bit of a question mark at this point is Liam Doyle, who was the number 2 pick or number 2 spot on our rankings, was the Cardinals' first round pick in this year's draft out of Tennessee. The interesting thing about Doyle, left-handed starting pitcher, I was at a big workload at Tennessee. The Cardinals traditionally have, and we're going to get to this and talk about the big league club here in a minute. Obviously, we know they won 2 out of 3 against the Dodgers this week. We got a lot of things to break down about that series. But the thing about Doyle is, in the past, the Cardinals have been pretty reluctant to have their pitchers start in that minor league season when they pitched such a heavy workload in college. He threw 95 innings at Tennessee this year. We saw it with Quinn Matthews, too. He missed all of 2023 after the draft because they thought he had pitched too many innings that spring at Stanford. So, but the new regime in charge, Rob Cifolio and the other people taking over the player development system, they may not have that same philosophy. So Doyle is actually in Jupiter working out with the other recent draft picks, and I think he is going to be in line to pitch at some point for one of the affiliates here before the end of the season. And the interesting thing to me, and actually I just had a conversation with one of the Cardinal scouts about this on the phone earlier today, Springfield is going to be in the playoffs. How would you like to welcome Liam Doyle into the Cardinal organization by having him pitch in Springfield during the Texas League playoffs?
The thing about Doyle for me is, and maybe I'm the only one that thinks this, but I truly think that high-level Division I baseball in the SEC is very good baseball. It's probably equivalent to a AA team already because the SEC is the cream of the crop right there. So that's why I think Doyle has a chance to be farther along than some of these other guys because he's jumping in probably right in that AA level already.
Well, and one of the things that we're going to talk about in the story on JJ that will be up on the story, and I actually talked to JJ about this, is that I think it's 6, if I remember. I have to go back and do the math. 6 or 7 guys who are in last year's draft, 2024 draft, are already in the major leagues. And some of them, like Nick Kurtz at the Athletics, having great success at this point. John Castiglione at the Royals. So yeah, you're right. I mean, these guys are coming quicker and quicker and faster than ever. And I think a large part of that is due to the experience they're getting. If they play, 3 years of Division I baseball and high level Division I baseball, they're basically, I think, at the AA level, if not higher.
And it's safe to say that the SEC is, one of the highest rated conferences when it comes to baseball, right? So I think there is that already there. And to me, I think pitchers move a little bit quicker because you're not having to figure out how to hit major league pitching, which is a little bit tougher, I think. Obviously, it's one of the hardest things to do. If you can do it 3 out of 10 times, you're a Hall of Famer. So it's obviously pretty tough. But so I think pitching and swing and miss stuff is what we need. So I think somebody like him may come quicker because we're seeing on this team that errors and poor defense are not helping out this lack of pitching.
Yeah, and of course, the thing that Doyle brings to the table, which the current Cardinal pitching staff doesn't have as much of, is the swing and miss stuff, the strikeout stuff. Obviously, he had 15 and a half strikeouts average on 9 innings during his season at Tennessee. So I think he struck out like 42% of the batters he faced this year in college. So that's an element to the game that I think is needed by the Cardinals, and obviously one of the reasons why not only with Doyle, but they went so heavy on college pitching this year in the draft with the emphasis on guys who could miss bats.
And I think as we talk about this major league team, that's been the struggle for this starting pitching, right? And the defense has been okay, but that's where you're seeing guys get free passes and free outs. And it almost happened the other day in the first play of the game, and Ohtani hits a grounder to Burleson, and he can't field it. Now, luckily, they got the double play right after that, but you just can't give free passes to these teams.
And I also think you're dealing with a major league club that as we all know and we've talked about before, sometimes you just don't know what the offense is going to do. I mean, they've been shut out, 9 or 10 times since the started July, and that's a long stretch. So if you're struggling to score runs, then the best way to try to win ball games is to prevent runs, and that's through good starting pitching and through defense. And right now, of course, you also have some questions about how the Cardinals are going to end games in the back end of the bullpen since the trade of all their top 3 relievers.
And the tough part about the defense is you're trying to find ways to get as many of these young bats in the lineup. So you're moving positions. You got Herrera playing left field. You got Gorman playing third. And it's not to say that they can't, but it's difficult when you keep moving guys in different spots and there's different angles and arm angles and positions they have to be in. And so it takes some time, it takes a learning curve. And the question that as we transition and talk about this, and as we talk about your other list of the 10 things the Cardinals need to do at the end of this season, or as we progress here, the question they got to find out is, are they giving up, or are they still trying to fight for this last wild card spot at 5 games back?
I don't think they're giving up. I think they're trying to win ball games. I mean, you go every night trying to win, especially if you're, the starting pitcher that they're rolling out there every night. He wants to win that ball game. But I think there is some things they can do to develop players to answer questions about 2026 at the same time. And you saw it this week in Los Angeles with, the Cardinals actually win 2 or 3 games against the Dodgers, which I don't know that a lot of people would have predicted before that series began. But I've always maintained, and I think you're right about this, about the Cardinals playing up to the level or down to the level of their competition.
Well, and I think the reason you won is you're starting pitching. Sonny Gray looked fantastic, striking out 8, going 7 innings, only giving up 1. And that's what we talked about, swing and miss stuff. They weren't putting the balls in play, and that's what kept them in control. Now, we only scored 1 off Glasnow, so Sonny didn't get the win, but he kept you in the game. And then you can't say enough about what Libby did yesterday.
Right, yeah, very much. They did a good game.
Against, a lineup like that, and you're facing Ohtani and he's pitching and we couldn't hit him, and they just continue to battle. And yesterday's game looked more like a team that you've seen at the start of this season where they got down but they didn't get frustrated and they came back and battled it. And I think that's the biggest concern now is with the back end of this bullpen, you're going to have guys in different roles and guys you can't go to every day and guys you're not comfortable using in those positions because all he doesn't have is 3 guys that he's gone to every year, every close game. So he's going to have to figure something else out. And I think that's where the starting pitching is going to be key because you got to just limit the runs.
The good thing on Wednesday's game was the fact that Ohtani's still not all the way back from his Tommy John surgery, so he had to come out after 4 innings. I don't know how many strikeouts he would have had, or how many, if he had been able to stay in the ballgame. Of course, he still had more home runs by himself than he gave up runs.
And the only comment I will have about that game is in that situation where Ohtani's up, you got a runner on second, first base open, you walk him every time. There are certain players that just get that treatment, right? And the Barry Bonds treatment when he was in his big home run season, right? You just have to do the same thing. McGuire got the same treatment. I mean, Shohei Ohtani is the Babe Ruth of this generation. Maybe he's better than Babe Ruth. I don't know yet. We don't know, but he's doing things that are incredible. So if somebody's going to beat you, let it be Mookie. It can't be Shohei.
Yeah. Of course, done with the Dodgers now unless they meet them in the playoffs. The other 2 things I really liked, I think, it's going to be interesting to see how they use the bullpen, how they use the young pitchers, and who takes that opportunity and runs with it. Right? I mean, who gets the ball in those late innings and what they can do. You saw a couple of examples in these 3 games. Kyle Leahy, we talked about all year, obviously looks like he's ready to take that next level, whether it be back into the bullpen or perhaps a starting slot. And then Riley O'Brien, I thought, came through with a couple of good performances in that series.
And I think the biggest concern as we look at this situation is what to do with Miles Mikolas, because you just don't know where he's going to be. Last game he gave up 5. The game before that, it was nothing. And then the game before that was another 5. Game before that was nothing. Game before that was 8 runs. So, I mean, you just don't know what Mikolas is going to show up. And the interesting thing that I would say when comparing him to like Kyle Leahy, because Leahy to me, and I think to you, looks like he deserves a chance to be a starter and see what he has, right? So what if you move Mikolas to coming in the 3rd or 4th inning after Leahy and see if that kind of jumps him or does something different?
Yeah, I'm worth giving it a shot and see what happens. I don't think you guys, and that was kind of the point of the column that you alluded to a minute ago, is the 10 things that I think the Cardinals should do at the end of the season. One was to give Leahy some spot starts, because we know there's going to be an opening in the rotation in 2026, at least one, if not 2 or more. And I think that they need to find out about Leahy. And I don't know that you can necessarily find out about a guy as a starting pitcher candidate in spring training. I mean, okay, they say they're going to stretch him out a little bit now and see what he does in spring training, but I'd rather get him, 3 or 4, even if it's 3 or 4 innings. It's not, deep into a start, but still it's enough to kind of see how it's going to work. And I just don't see that there's any reason not to do that.
Well, and I think you've got a couple opportunities to do that. Now, as I've mentioned multiple times before, I do think this team plays to the level of their competition. I wish they wouldn't, but as you look at the rest of this month here,
unless they're playing really good teams, yeah.
Well, for sure. But I'm saying, as you look at this schedule the rest of the month, you've got the Rockies on it, you've got the Marlins on it, you got the Pirates on it. So there's teams that you can win games against, and then you look at the teams that are ahead of you in the Cubs and the Reds, and everything that you're 5 games out in the wild card. If you want to take a shot, here's your shot. But when it comes to the Rockies or the Pirates, is that where you could look at saying, hey, let's try to start somebody else here and see what happens? Because the Rockies are historically bad this year.
Rob Rains visiting with Mike Rains here on the STL Sports Page Rains on the Cardinals podcast, brought to you by our great friends at the Drury Hotel. As a reminder, there is a Drury Hotel. It's just not happen to be in Memphis. It's right across the border, just about 15 minutes or so away from the AutoZone Park, Olive Branch, Horn Lake, Mississippi, down there right across the border at I-55. So encourage you to check it out if you're coming down to Memphis this way. They've got about a little over a month left of games down here this season, as well as then, of course, any other activities that happen in Memphis. Memphis is kind of a hopping town, and I urge you to also go out and pick up a copy of the new book, All Roads Lead to St. Louis, a guide to the Cardinals and their minor league teams. Just out, the revised edition. It's got a bunch of new features, new information about all the minor league teams. And if you're traveling and going to Peoria, to Springfield, to Florida, even for spring training, it's available at Amazon or anywhere else you find order a book online. So appreciate it if you would check it out. I think you'd enjoy a lot of our feature stories that we've done over the last couple of years about Cardinal minor league prospects is in there as well. So it's good. So, all right. So you mentioned the list. What other items on my top 10 list that jumped out to you?
Well, the interesting thing is Victor Scott, right? Because you talk about Victor batting leadoff, and I think that's something we've both been talking about for a long time, with his speed to generate offense and see what happens. Now, I guess the question is, when is the right time to make that move, right? Does that move spark some offense and you see what happens, or is it going to put more pressure on him that he feels like he needs to perform because they are still fighting for a wild card spot? That and I think that's the struggle with a young guy like Victor, is can he succeed in that role, or is he going to feel like it's too much pressure?
But I also think the other flip side of that is they haven't had a lot of success out of the leadoff hitters here for the last 6 weeks or so.
They haven't had a lot of success out of a lot of their hitters the last 6 weeks or so.
Well, that's true. You could say that. So I don't know that trying it really hurts anything. Especially if it's a day when Donovan has the day off. Maybe Mason Wynn seems to have done pretty well. Batting down a little bit in the order, so keep him there. And I kind of think Scott 1, Donovan 2 would be a really nice top of the lineup.
And I think sometimes people get kind of complacent with where they are with certain things, right? So does shaking up the lineup help and show people like, hey, you're not always going to be stuck in this spot? However, I think that's probably my one downside on Ollie is the fact that he just continues to plug in the same things every day and not really change it up or try something different.
Yeah. And, when it's working, that's fine. I mean, but to me, I think you could argue it's working because they're sitting there on the outside of a playoff spot. But I think that devil's advocate would say the negative side of that would say you're also a 500 team. So is that really an indication that it's working if you're only being a 500 team?
And that brings me to the next point on your list is, well, I don't know if I'm drawing a blank here. I don't remember if it was on your list, but at some point, as we let Heim take over in this transition, we have to make a decision on Ollie Marmol because
It's not specifically on the list, but I understand your point.
So maybe that's part of the transition aspect as Heim starts to take over here. So Ollie's got 1 year left on his contract. I can confidently say that I don't think Ollie's the problem, but I also don't think Ollie's the solution right now. So the question they have to figure out is he going to be the guy for Heim? And if he is, then he needs to get extended to a multi-year contract and not play in kind of a, quote unquote lame duck season right here with no contract at the end. Or if he's not your guy, same thing. What are we waiting for if we're going to let him go? Why don't we try to, change up the lineup, change up the spark in the atmosphere, in the room, in the clubhouse, just see if something gets this team going a little bit. Because right now it just seems kind of flat.
I mean, the biggest thing with all of this stuff that's going to happen in the transition is we just don't know what Heim thinks. I mean, he's been in here for 2 years, but it's really kept a low profile, easy to say, really kept in the background. And I know he's got opinions about players and personnel that you think he's going to act on once he takes over and is officially in charge. But it's still hard to say what it's going to be because we just don't know what he thinks about some of this stuff.
And we've heard Most say it all the time. He's like, I don't fill out the lineup cards. I don't make the decisions down there. That's all Ollie. So the question to me is, does Heim agree with the decisions that Ollie's making? And we don't know the answer to that. So it's just kind of going to be interesting to see the transition. But to me, something has to get going in this team to try to change it, to flip the difference. And one stat that I looked up that I'm curious on your opinion on this is from July 1st to August 1st, we were outscored 130 to 81. Is that a product of the offense or a product of the starting pitching?
It's a product of both. I mean, that was a stretch when the starting pitchers were not very good. And also was a stretch where you got shut out 3 consecutive games in Pittsburgh, and you got, some other couple games against the Cubs. So yeah, so I think it's a combination of the two. I do. I don't think you can point the finger entirely at one aspect of this team. I think there's a lot of things that are flawed that need to get better.
And I think, that's what kind of moves into one of the other items on your list was Miles Mikolas. What do you do with him? Do you let him continue to pitch or do you not?
Loyalty is a strange word in baseball. And somebody once told me it's a virtue and it's also a curse. And I think there's 100% truth to that. They've been very loyal to Miles Mikolas. Cardinals have paid him a lot of money over the years. He's been going to a couple of All-Star games, earned a couple of All-Star selections. So he's had a nice long career, but I just think the results now are too inconsistent to continue. And I don't think I think he probably knows that he's not going to be on the Cardinals staff in 2026. He wants to pitch. He wants to pitch the rest of the season because he wants to pitch well in terms of trying to get a contract from somebody else. But I don't think that's the Cardinals' highest priority. Shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be, no. And I think that's the question mark becomes who can fill that spot. As we talked about, Kyle Leahy's probably a good option there, but is a guy like Quinn Matthews somebody that could come up and take that last spot? Is a guy like Gordon Graceffo a guy that can take that spot? I think, according to one of the items on your list that people should read too, is you think Graceffo should get that shot at the closer role. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just kind of trying to figure out where these guys fit and what the best feel is for them. And I think that's what this month and a half, 2 months left should be for.
Yeah, and maybe it'll be different in September. Maybe see what happens here. As we say, there's a tough stretch of games coming up. 3 against the Cubs starting on Friday night, and the 3 against the Rockies, which the Cardinals lost the series to the Rockies in Colorado, and then the 3 games against the Yankees. I hope the crowds at the ballpark are good. I hope the fans come out to watch some of these games. The Cubs series should draw; it always does, and maybe the enthusiasm and fans will help kind of pick up the team a little bit.
I did hear an interesting stat about the Rockies that made me feel a little bit better, though. Prior to the Blue Jays just beating them very badly in this last 3-game series, the Rockies had won the last 3 series at home.
Okay.
So we weren't the only ones that they'd beaten. So they're playing better at home. But regardless, I think over the next 2 to 3 week stretch, you've got the teams on the schedule, A, that you can beat, and B, that you need to beat to continue to make this push. So if they want to try to be a team and, push for the wild card, it's got to go right now. And it starts with 3 against the Cubs.
Yeah, I think the other thing about the Dodgers series too, if you look at it, I don't think the Dodgers are playing very well right now. I think the Padres are a much better club, especially with the moves they made at the trade deadline. I think that the Dodgers are hopefully going to get some of their injured pitchers back. And I know they've got 6 head-to-head games left against the Padres, so I think that's something that they're focused on to see if they can get away from separate a little bit in that path out there. That's going to be an interesting race to watch.
And honestly, I think a lot of teams right now are kind of playing, I don't want to say 500 ball, but not really performing as well as they should. Because take a look at the Yankees. They've really been struggling lately too. And so when you get them here next weekend, hopefully they're kind of in that same path and you keep going. But, you look at a team like the Cubs and they're 5-5 in their last 10. The Mets are 5-5 in their last 10. So, these teams that are ahead of us really aren't cruising out like crazy. But when you look at our last 10 and we're 3-7, we're not doing anything to help us cut that gap down.
No, and I think the other thing about the Cubs is too. You look at they're kind of playing with some purpose right now coming into this weekend because they're falling behind the Brewers. I mean, the Brewers right now are the best team in baseball, and I think the Cubs have got to try to figure out how they're going to get back in that race.
And they really do. And the question's going to be, is anything going to slow the Brewers down? And I think what's interesting is when you watch this division and you watch a team like the Brewers are getting production from guys that we probably didn't know a whole lot about that we didn't think about. When you look at Isaac Collins, Blake Perkins, and Joey Ortiz, the bottom half of their lineup's really coming through like crazy. And I think that's what's propelled them so well. Now, you look at the Cardinals situation and the Reds are ahead of them too, but I think anyone that looks at it would say those teams are streaky. And so the question is, can you just start to be a little bit more consistent and close that gap so when they're on a downhill swing, you're right within striking distance?
And the other thing about the striking distance, and this kind of goes back into the topic that you talked about right at the start of the show, and the Cardinal prospect list that was ranked and published on Wednesday is, would somebody like J.J. Weatherholt, and I know combining the 2 stories, I also had a point on there that I think the Cardinals would be better off by leaving him to Memphis over the course of the season. But the way he's playing right now, and you get closer toward the end of August when you don't have to sacrifice his rookie eligibility for 2026, it wouldn't shock me if J.J. Weatherholt ends this season playing in St. Louis.
And it would certainly provide a spark, right? And from a fan standpoint, you want to be excited and you want to go to the game. So would fans come to see JJ play? I think they would. The question for me is, who do you start him over right now? Because everybody keeps saying, oh, well, we need a trade for a better this, or we need a better second baseman. And then it's like, okay, well, we're going to play him over Gorman. Well, no, don't do that. Or, oh, we're going to trade him Burleson. Oh, no, don't do that. So where do you want him to play? That's my question mark, is we don't have room for all of these guys.
Encourage you to check out the list. Of course, some of the new players that the Cardinals traded for are ranked in these rankings. Jesus Baez, the young shortstop they got from the Mets, who's playing at Peoria. Nate Dom, one of the pitchers they got from the Mets, is also at Peoria. A couple of guys that they got didn't make the list, but they're interesting prospects as well. But another guy on that list is Blaze Jordan, who's the native of the Memphis area across the state line in Mississippi, and happened to be here for the first couple of games that he played as the Memphis Redbirds, and had his Blaze's fan club out there. So he's already got a little cheering section waiting for him here in the games in Memphis. An interesting young player. I know that we talked about after the trade deadline, Mike, because you had a history with him. I've seen him at the Perfect Game. I think it's a couple of years ago, and I think he's going to be an interesting player to watch. Of course, the way bringing him on in that trade did cost the Cardinals that chance to keep Luke Baker. They put him on waivers, and he was claimed by the Dodgers. So wish the best of luck to Lucan in his new career, and hope the move to the Dodgers works out for him. And unfortunately, it just seemed like he was blocked in St. Louis and wasn't ever going to get the opportunity to have a real shot at regular playing time.
Yeah, you feel bad for Lucan, because I do think he's going to be a good player, but we were kind of handicapped and he was kind of handicapped because he can only play first base. He hits hard. He's going to hit the ball and hit a lot of home runs, but when you're only playing first base and you're 26 years old and first base is kind of stuck, and you sign a kid who's hitting a higher average than you and 5 years younger than you, it kind of changes the game a little bit. So I think that's where, Blaze is going to get the chance. And I'm excited for Blaze. I think he's going to be a really good player. And, as Wilson Contreras and his contract expires in the next few years, I think you're going to see Blaze start to make an impact here.
So we'll be interested in watching his development. And I think, Cubs, obviously the Cubs Cardinals series this weekend coming up as well. So it's always a good time to be down here in Memphis. And Mike, it's an interesting time for the Cardinals because they've got a lot of things going on that we're going to keep monitoring and see what happens. I think Quinn Matthews, as we mentioned, gets to start here on Thursday night as well.
I do think, the fate is in their hands, right? The destiny, whatever they want to do, is they're playing the teams they need to play this month. So it's their decision to decide if they want to get it together and go for it, or if they're going to continue to just ride this path of not scoring any runs.
Going to be interesting to find out. Mike, thanks for the visit. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for everybody for tuning in to this edition of the Reins on the Cardinals podcast on STLSportsPage.com.